For centuries, the northern Somali coast turned the Red Sea into a doorway between Africa, Arabia, and Empire. The Adal Sultanate rose around Zila. Ottoman and Portuguese power watched the sea lanes. Britain made this coast a protectorate in 1884, then let it go in June 1960. 5 days later, the state of Somaliland joined Italian Somalia to form the Somali Republic, a brief country, a long wound. Today, Somaliland claims about 176,000 square kilometers and more than 6 million people, yet most of the world still treats it as a region of Somalia. That means passports, aid, loans, and recognition move around it like water around stone, a country without a chair. Yet for someone arriving in Hargeisa for the first time, invisibility is not what they would notice. The city wakes before the heat settles over the highlands. Shops roll open along busy streets. Minibuses weave between markets. Vendors arrange fruit beneath bright awnings while tea houses fill with conversation. Nothing about daily life suggests a place waiting for permission to exist. And that is the first surprise Somaliland offers. The mystery is not how Somaliland survives. The mystery is why a place that looks so much like a country still has to convince the world that it is one, not a breakaway headline, a place asking whether survival can become sovereignty. The land is ochre hills, thorn trees, dry riverbeds, camel dust, and the blue blade of the Gulf of Aden. Hargeisa carries rebuilt streets over buried rubble, while Berbera faces the sea like an old port remembering every sail that ever passed. Somaliland is not only a political question, it is an argument about endurance, and in a world where borders look permanent until they do not, this forgotten edge of Africa is less an exception than a warning. The 5-day country. In June 1960, Somaliland existed as an independent state for only 5 days. That number sounds small until it touches a people. "5 days was enough for flags, recognition from several governments, and the legal memory of a state, not enough to protect that memory from being swallowed by a larger dream." The dream was pan-Somali unity. British Somaliland in the north and Italian Somalia in the south were supposed to become one body, joined by language, religion, and kinship across colonial lines. But maps do not heal simply because ink agrees. To understand why the union eventually fractured, it helps to see what northern Somalia actually was. This was not an empty corner of Africa. Livestock traders crossed long distances between inland grazing lands and coastal ports. Families built lives around wells, seasonal migration routes, and markets that connected the Horn of Africa to Arabia. Across dry valleys and dusty plains, communities depended on networks far older than modern states. The political argument would eventually become national, but its consequences would always be local. In Hargeisa and Berbera, the new republic slowly became something uneven. Power gathered far away in Mogadishu, grievances hardened. By the time Mohammed Siad Barre's rule turned violent in the north, the idea of union had become a closed room. Then came 1988. Human rights records describe the government's counter-insurgency in the north as devastating, with Hargeisa and Berbera bombarded during the war against the Somali national movement. Tens of thousands were killed, and hundreds of thousands fled. A statistic becomes a family leaving its house with no door to return to. The city was not simply damaged, it was emptied. And yet people returned. Families came back to streets where landmarks had vanished. Shopkeepers reopened businesses beneath temporary roofs. Schools restarted in damaged buildings. Markets reappeared before reconstruction plans ever did. The rebuilding of Somaliland was not led by architects or foreign planners alone. It began with ordinary people deciding not to leave forever. The capital rebuilt from dust, Hargeisa does not look like an abstraction. It is market noise, corrugated roofs, tea steam, painted shop fronts, and the dry light of the highlands falling across streets that had to be made again. After 1991, when Somaliland declared the restoration of its independence, there was no easy rescue waiting, no broad recognition, no Marshall Plan, no clean international doorway. So the place leaned on what it had. But it held. That is why it matters. Somaliland's claim is not that it became perfect, its claim is that it did not collapse. But Hargeisa is only part of the story. Along the shores of the Gulf of Aden, another chapter was already waiting, the port facing Arabia. Berbera is older than the modern argument. Before diplomats debated recognition, this coast already knew movement. The Gulf of Aden opens in front of it like a blue corridor between the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea. A port is never only concrete. It is hunger inland, money abroad, animals moving toward ships, and families waiting for prices to rise before the next drought breaks them. Livestock remains one of Somaliland's economic lifelines, with animals moving through Berbera toward Gulf markets. When exports are blocked by disease bans or politics, the damage does not stay at the harbour. It travels back through pastoral communities, into wells, debts, marriages, school fees, and meals. A ship delayed becomes a household calculation. In 2016, major investment arrived in Berbera, expanding the port and tying Somaliland more closely to global trade. To outsiders, that sounds like infrastructure. To Somaliland, it is also a wager that a place without full recognition can still force the world to use its doorway. The border that lives without permission. Somaliland is often described by what it lacks: no universal recognition, no seat at the United Nations. But absence has its own architecture. There are police uniforms, ministries, schools, courts, taxes, and a currency. A place can function even when the world hesitates to define it. This is where the story becomes uncomfortable, because the question is not only whether Somaliland governs itself, it is what recognition might mean for a continent whose borders were largely inherited from empire. That fear is not imaginary. But neither is Somaliland. The African map is full of inherited lines. Somaliland's argument points back to a colonial boundary that once existed as British Somaliland, and to a brief independence before union in 1960. Not a new border from nowhere, an old border asking to be believed again. The country behind the word. Recognition sounds ceremonial from far away. A flag raised, a speech, a handshake, a new line in an atlas. But for ordinary people, recognition can mean whether a passport opens or closes a door, whether students can move, and whether opportunities arrive easily or not at all. A diplomatic word becomes a human ceiling. Somalilanders have lived under that ceiling for more than 3 decades since 1991. Children have become parents inside a political condition the world still calls temporary. There is something almost geological about that. A temporary thing, if it lasts long enough, begins to shape the people inside it. Somaliland's deepest mystery is not whether it is real. It is how long reality can be denied before denial becomes the stranger fiction. Somaliland stands at the edge of the Gulf of Aden, between old empire roots and new global anxieties. Between the memory of a 5-day country and the endurance of a 30-year one. It is not famous because the world knows what to do with it. It is famous because the world does not. And across the planet, in ports, deserts, mountains, and borderlands, other places are waiting with the same quiet question: when does survival become a country?